This is Healthcare Uprising. We are here to shine a light on the innovators implementing positive change in American healthcare and the patient experience stories, good and bad, that can help others navigate the sometimes overwhelmingly complex American healthcare system. Welcome to the Uprising. We are not doctors and we don't play one on TV. If you need medical advice, consult with your physician or a healthcare professional. All right. Hello, health heads. Welcome and thank you for checking in to this dose of the Healthcare Uprising. I'm your producer in the back, Jeremy Carr, here with your host in the front row, Heather Pierce. So what's on the agenda for today, Heather?
So in today's episode, we're focusing on a human story. This one has a unique business perspective weaved in. We're talking with Stacey Meade. She spent more than 20 years working with employers on their healthcare plans, along with trying to help her husband with getting health coverage for the restaurants that she owns with him. His name is Tom. So she's seen employer-sponsored healthcare from many, many angles. So we call her a bit of a healthcare employee benefits veteran.
A true journeyman, as
Yes.
it were.
But in November 2023, and why she's here with us today, she encountered a pretty significant health scare with her husband, Tom. And all the know-how in the world through her work in healthcare and employee benefits literally could not have prepared her for this situation. So she had just left Meritain Health, that was a third-party administrator, part of Aetna, and with the intent of focusing full-time on executive coaching and team development, and she and her husband were opening their third restaurant when a simple tooth extraction opened her eyes and his to an entirely different side of healthcare. Without telling too many details, we'll let the episode literally do the talking. But they started a journey which opened her eyes to a set of challenges in the healthcare system that she had never seen, even after working in it for as long as she had. Her experience helping health systems recruit and retain employees through benefits collided with what happens when providers are overextended. But luckily, she and her husband came across two providers that were fully engaged in their work and really helped change the course of their care and lives. The treatment they provided really that was the clincher. So let's hear her story.
Yeah, all right. You said it. Without further ado, here's our interview with Stacey Meade.
Welcome to the show, Stacey.
Thanks. Well, happy to be here.
Great. Well, today we're talking about, once again, another caretaking healthcare navigation story in the kind of U.S. healthcare ecosystem. And Stacey's story is just one of them. She's also brings experience from working in the industry. So I think that makes this interview and this discussion even more unique. So Stacey, with that, let's just jump right in and tell us about what happened. Like, just start from the beginning. Why are you here on the show? You've got a healthcare scare with your husband and a journey that you went through. And like I mentioned, you worked in the business, so that kind of gives you a leg up, one would think. So I'm just going to let you take it away and kick it off for us here.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I really did feel like it was important to share my story because, as you mentioned, I've been in the healthcare industry for more than 20 years. I've done tons of employee education meetings and advised employers on how to help people make good decisions during a healthcare journey. And when I was faced with my husband's healthcare journey, I didn't know what to do. And so that connection between what we say needs to happen and what happens in reality is the gap that I want to draw some attention to. So long story short, I've been in healthcare for 25 years, done lots of things that is employee facing, helping people understand when should you go to the emergency room? How do we help people get the right care at the right time? Using advisors and navigation type services. And last year, my husband, who owns restaurants, he was in the process of opening his third restaurant, and he had told me, "Hey, I've got a tooth infection." Of course, on the day of our opening, he needed the tooth pulled. Painful, but you know what? He got through it. They gave him not lots of drugs, and really seemed to be a pretty routine situation. And 2 days later, he tells me that his neck hurts and it's just starting to hurt a little bit. And by the next day, this man never goes to the doctor. He actually took himself to an urgent care thinking like, oh, he must have pulled a muscle in his neck. He'd been doing lots of work with the opening, lifting heavy things. So he goes to the urgent care. Urgent care tells him, yeah, it's probably just a pulled muscle. Here's some muscle relaxants, go home. 2 days later, he wakes up with the worst headache of his life. He could hardly open his eyes. When he went to stand up, he vomited. It was awful. And okay, my healthcare brain pops up and says, worst headache of your life? Probably a stroke or an aneurysm, something horrific. You need to go to the emergency room. So I did. He actually didn't even argue with me. We went straight to the emergency room. We spent 8 hours there. They did testing, exactly what you expect, popping in and out, trying to help you, send him through CAT scan, MRIs, all of those things. To which their answer was, it's not a stroke, it's not an aneurysm, see your primary care doc. That's it. They did offer to give him morphine, let him maybe take some of the edge off the pain, but that was it. And that was scary, really, really scary.
And he's a younger, healthier guy, like no.
51 years old. There's nothing wrong with him. He's in good shape. He obviously is working full time, running restaurants as a physical
Right.
job. He's been able to do these things. There was no reason to believe that anything should be significantly wrong with him.
Wow. Wow. And you were still with Aetna at the time?
I was employed there, working full time, and thank goodness, we have exactly the health insurance you expect from a large employer. Uh, but really, the support that I received was so much through the team that I worked with. The,
Hmm.
my boss that I worked with, my teammates, were checking in on me, sending me texts, trying to take care of things, because it was really the emotional toll
Hmm.
of just not knowing what was happening or what we could do was really difficult.
Hmm. And you're, you've worked in the business, like you're like, I should know everything, right? Like I should be the most well-equipped person to go through something like this, and then you find yourself being in a situation where you're like, I don't know what to do, or it's confusing. So,
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we were at the emergency room. They sent us home, and I called my healthcare navigator and said, "Hey, can you help me?" And their answer was, "Well, who do you want an appointment with? We'll help you get an appointment." And I was like, "I don't know. I know the ER can't help,
yeah,
but
you're like, isn't that your job to
yeah,
help me?
yeah.
Yeah, there's a
And
reason I'm calling.
to be fair, I've been
Yeah.
part of training healthcare navigators that answer
Yeah.
these questions, and certainly they've got no more healthcare knowledge than I do. But
Yeah.
as a scared wife, I don't know who else to call.
Mm.
So
Wow.
we ended up taking the advice of the emergency room and calling his primary care, getting him in there a couple of days later. And I can only thank goodness that PCP was totally with it.
Hmm. And that it wasn't something that you needed like literally right then and there, because that could have
Yeah,
been terrible.
totally. And the thing is it took us 2 days to get into his primary care doc. And in those 2 days, his symptoms did not improve. I remember at one point he said the smoke detector light in our bedroom was too bright for him,
Oh my
that
gosh.
it was making his stomach upset. He couldn't stand. It was horrible. And all I knew was the ER said they couldn't help. And so I'm going to
Mm.
assume he won't die.
Yeah, that's like to be sent home like that. That's got to be
It
really
was
terrifying.
It really was. And it was, I had no clear path forward. I didn't
Hmm.
know what to do besides get into the primary care doc. And I could just simply hope that nothing worse would happen.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
what next? What
Yeah.
happened
Well,
next? Dun dun dun.
yes.
I feel like we need some sound here, Jeremy, because
It's crazy that this all came from a tooth extraction. That sound of it,
Totally.
right?
That's exactly right. And
As
you know what?
as a
That
guy who's had a lot of dental issues, this is a frightening story.
Mhm.
totally. And
Yeah.
he's had other tooth issues before. This was not his first one, but that was actually the trigger to his primary care doctor who said, terrible headache, nothing on your CT or MRI scan. I think that this is trigeminal neuralgia, which I've never heard of.
Say
Um,
that again.
Trigeminal neuralgia. So you've got a trigeminal nerve
Okay.
that runs behind your ear and it splits off. I'm no doctor here. I'm repeating what I know, which it splits off into going into your temple, your cheek, and your jaw.
Okay.
And in some people, sometimes that nerve just freaks out for no reason. Now, it can be triggered by something like a tooth extraction.
Mm.
But in his case, his pain was on the right side and the extraction was on the left. So
Okay.
I don't know if that's why the ER didn't put that together, or because trigeminal neuralgia is such it's a chronic condition. It's sometimes even called the suicide disease because the pain is so intense and there really is very little treatment for it that it frequently results in suicides.
Oh, that's awful.
Wow.
It was certainly not what you want to hear. And
Mm-mm.
I don't know why the ER wouldn't have known that. I don't know if it's because it's a condition that's not, immediately life-threatening. And so that's just not their training. But the doctor, the primary care doc, is the one who said, I think this might be what's going on.
Hmm.
And at least gave us something to start. If I look back at the journey, those few days where I didn't know what to do and there was literally nothing I could do except try and get him some, Pedialyte and, an eye mask, at least trying something felt better than doing nothing.
Yeah. Wow. So you go and see the PCP. They say, "Yeah, I think this is." And is this a doctor that you've already like you had like a relationship with already, like established?
Yeah, we had been seeing the doctor for years, but I mean, again, he's young and healthy. Young is a relative term,
So
but
you don't see him very often,
Young
right?
enough,
yeah,
young
Yeah.
enough.
Okay.
young enough. Yeah, and so the once a year checkup that gets me the employer rewards
Uh-huh.
was the reason we had. But thank goodness, right? If I think about how many men that I know the same age that don't have a relationship with a primary care doc, like this
Hmm.
would have been a much longer journey
Yeah,
had
that's
he.
why I asked because I thought of my own husband, quite
Mhm.
honestly. I actually finally just got him set up with a, a, a PCP for the first time in, you know what, it's probably a decade, I'm not gonna lie. And I thought about because that's so typical, right? In Jeremy, I mean, you don't even have
I
health
spoke
insurance.
in one of our previous interviews how I go to the doctor once every 10 years for a tetanus shot and a quick checkup. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Literally, I
Well,
go once a decade.
and to be fair, my husband would have done the same thing, but my employer had a benefit that said I got $125 per person on the health plan in our HSA if we did a primary care visit. So I told him he either had to go get the primary care visit or he owed me 125 bucks.
Yeah.
And
Those
it worked.
yeah, the incentives are great for like preventive care. And I think a lot of employers probably, particularly I feel like with HSA plans too, um, because you do pay out of pocket more. Um,
What does HSA mean?
oh, let us educate.
Yes. All these anagrams.
I'm gonna let Stacey because she's the benefits pro here. Although we both did work at Aetna together at one
Yeah.
point. And now our lives cross paths again. But yeah, you're the benefits pro, so I'm gonna leave it to you to
Yeah.
explain
So
that.
HSAs are health savings accounts. And what happened as deductibles kept rising, everybody realized that not a lot of families can afford $3,000 every single year toward their deductible. And so there's a tax advantaged way you set aside money. It's sort of like an FSA account or a flexible spending account, if you're familiar with that, where you don't have to pay taxes on the money that goes in, you don't have to pay taxes on the money that goes out. The big advantage is HSAs or health savings accounts. They roll over from year to year. You don't have to use it or lose it, and you can invest the money. So I've been a big fan of HSAs. I've actually had it from when we were much younger and healthier, and was able to save up some money so that I could consistently purchase the highest deductible plan and have some money so that if something awful were to happen, we didn't have to pay all of that out of pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Look, we even got a little health plan type education in this
Yeah.
episode today.
That sounds like if you get one of those and put your money in there instead of the paying health insurance every month, you might be better off in the long run.
Yeah, so you want to use it in addition to health insurance. So, I
In
mean,
addition,
ultimately, I've been doing this for more than 10 years, and I think I have maybe $15,000 in there, which is great. That absolutely helped because we were on a $6,000 deductible plan when all of this happened. But certainly that wouldn't have covered what we've spent on his treatment. So it
Yeah.
can kind of help bridge that gap.
All right.
Yeah.
okay.
Um, I want to say, like, I'm trying to be funny here and say, and now back to our regular programming. Um, so that
That
was,
was a good clarification, though.
yeah,
Thank you.
it was, yeah. No, I think that's helpful. And we want to educate here on the healthcare uprising. So let's get back to the story. So you've got the diagnosis, PCP. All right. So
Yep.
then what happens after
So
that?
So he said, look, the fact is with trigeminal neuralgia, there are very few proven treatments. The disease is unknown of cause. It can be intermittent, where it just shows up because of something like a tooth extraction and it can end at any time, or it can exist for the rest of your life. Awesome. So
That's not very reassuring.
it was awful. So
Yikes.
it was, so it was better than having nothing, but not by a lot. So, again, as an educated professional, I go to Dr. Google, but I also go out to clinical care standards, right? So, Aetna publishes them, other carriers publish them to say what is considered appropriate standards of care for trigeminal neuralgia. I assure you, I have read a number of these in making decisions about whether a treatment was covered or excluded. And I'm not going to claim to be a nurse. I certainly had medical professionals helping, but it's a lot easier to understand when you're an objective third party
Mm-hmm.
than when it's your family member in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure, sure.
Yeah, when you're reading those words and you're saying, like, there's a laser treatment, laser surgery treatment on this thing that I don't know what that means. I don't even know who would do that. What type of doctor would perform that procedure? I have no idea.
Well, and the fact that you had the intuition or the know-how, quite honestly, to even go look at those, most people wouldn't even, they're like, what are you even talking about right now?
Right.
I mean, I kind of am like, what are you even talking about right now?
Yeah. So if it helps, there are publicly available standards that
Yeah.
say these are the types of treatments that are covered, particularly for things like cancer and
Mhm.
conditions that are out there, which are really great for medical professionals when they're trying to decide what path to proceed with. And so, again, I'm a professional in this. I think I know what I'm doing. But when I try and apply that information to my own life, it was much harder than I anticipated.
Mm.
So the
Hmm.
doctor gets him on some epilepsy meds, is actually what it is, because it slowed down his nerves to at least get him better.
Mhm.
And the medication, the doctor was outstanding. He called twice a day to see how was he doing. He was upping and changing our medications without having to have him come back in because the physical task of getting him out of bed, dressed, and into the PCP office was terrible. It was
And how far into this are we at this point? Like, days, weeks?
week, about a week and a day.
So it's fully debilitating then. Like it just
Oh, he
takes you out
couldn't.
of commission.
This man has not missed work since his hernia surgery, and he's now been a week out of work with a brand new restaurant opening.
Oh
Well,
my
yeah, I
gosh.
know restaurant people. They work 20 hours a day, all
Yeah,
the time, 7 days a week, all the
yes.
time.
Mhm.
And particularly during an opening, like this is just normal for him. And the fact that he couldn't even get out of bed, he they just assumed he couldn't make it because he couldn't even handle the phone call to talk
Oh,
about it.
that's like I
Wow.
gotta let go of the steering wheel and just
Yeah, it was,
let it
and
go.
thank goodness we've got some really outstanding folks that work
Hmm.
there and take care of it. So we finally get into the doctor's office on a Friday. The doctor called us twice a day, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, helping
That's
us adjust.
amazing, by the way, just the fact that he's calling like that often.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
back to this doctor was, and when we said this to him, I said, look, this is I've never had care like this except at my vet's office. My vet will call me that often.
This is true. Yes, they will. They
Right?
are vets are very communicative people.
That's because people like dogs better than people.
That's
That's why.
probably true.
I mean, I'm not far off. I can't blame him. But
I'm pretty
hey,
sure
he
that's a
went.
universal thing. We don't have to feel bad about it.
Hey, he's the one who went into human medicine, not animal medicine.
Right.
But but that kind of care made a huge difference. So we at least at this point now, the medicine's starting to take effect and it's improving, which tells us that like it probably is this trigeminal neuralgia. He's at a point where he can get dressed, he can sit up for a few hours. He can't go back to work or leave the house really, but he's improving. And the primary care calls back on Tuesday and says, okay, well, I'm glad that this is improving, but he's still nowhere near going back to regular life. And the doctor said, I want to try something with you because, with trigeminal neuralgia, because it's such an unknown condition, the length can go all over. We don't know if this medicine is just needs to build up for a little while or if this is as good as it's going to get. There's just not a lot of information. The doctor said, I want to try something different. And he said, I'm going to send you to a pain management guy. And red flags go off in my mind. Anybody in the health insurance industry will tell you pain management it's not that it can't be useful, but it's very often overused. It's very often, my husband is not a fan of covering up symptoms. It's
Mhm.
like, let's go find the root of the problem. But he was in such desperate shape. And as far as I was concerned, anything that got him further along helped. At this point, I stop even looking to see if anything's covered. I stop even asking the questions because all I cared about was getting him to some point of health.
Mhm.
So we took him to a guy named Mike Perry. He's a registered nurse anesthetist. And he's got a clinic where they inject a combination of it's saline, it's steroids, it's lidocaine. And the idea is that it can kind of create some blood flow and a little bit of numbing to areas that are overly inflamed and allow the body to heal itself. In all of my healthcare knowledge, I would tell you that's a bunch of crap and not going to be effective at all. In my life knowledge, I said, don't care if the doctor suggests it and we've made some progress, I'm willing to do anything. And so started seeing him 3, 4 days a week. And within a week, he was back to, I'm going to say functional. He could go to work. He was still in a lot of pain. He was still exhausted at the end of the day. The condition hadn't resolved, but the symptoms were better managed to get through. And so it's been
And at this
ongoing.
point too, just to be clear, like where are we at? I'm so obsessed with timelines.
Oh,
Like how long has this been going on at that point?
so at
Three,
that
four
point,
weeks?
it was about 3 weeks
Okay.
was how long it had been going on.
Okay.
And progress is being made though. That's a good sign.
It
I have no
was.
idea where this story's going. I'm so enthralled right now.
Well, I'll give you the upside here is he's in dramatically better shape, but it was a long journey to get
Mhm.
there. And so we start seeing so about a month, a little less than a month in, he starts going to the pain management doctor. You know, I don't care what it costs. I don't even care if it's going to be approved, none of those things. I've just wiped all of that out and said it after the first treatment, it seemed this much better. That's a tiny little pinch if anybody can't see. And a week in, he was meaningfully better.
Hmm.
I'm willing to keep going. So,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, yeah.
We're like on the edge of our seats here.
yeah. So about 4 weeks into that treatment, keep in mind he'd been on the medicine at that point for about 6 weeks. He'd been getting the pain management injections 3 to 4 days a week. And when I say injections, I really mean upwards of 20 sometimes injections all throughout his head in various points.
That sounds horrible.
I know he
Where
was,
do you even get injections in your head? Like it's your skull. They going in through the temple and stuff?
yeah, it was literally all throughout. Sometimes it was in the skull, sometimes it was in the temple, it was
Mm.
all around his
Whoa.
face and his
Oh
jaw,
God.
sometimes even down
Wow.
into the neck. Um,
Oh, I'm
and
like cringing just thinking
I
about
oh,
know,
that right
right?
now.
the
My
the
face
first
hurts.
time, like I was nauseous watching it. Um, but it it worked.
But it worked.
Right?
Yeah.
And so whatever it takes. And he is not a fan of needles. If you've ever seen him get a blood draw, those poor phlebotomists are getting
Mm.
grumped at. And he let this man willingly put 20 needles into his face and neck uh, to
Wow.
make an improvement.
And
And
quick question too. So this pain management doctor, had he treated anybody before? Did he share that if he had treated
yeah,
people with this same
good,
condition?
good, good question. The primary care doc is the one who turned us on to him,
Mm,
which
okay.
again, primary care docs don't tend to go straight to pain management. And what he actually said is he said, look, this is a personal friend of mine that I've seen people have some success with. So, in all seriousness, I don't know whether that doctor was making a professional recommendation or just feeling terrible for a man who was in this much pain. But he made the suggestion. We were willing to take any action. And so the pain management doc, he does this treatment on a wide range of things, including neuralgia. He had treated one or two trigeminal neuralgia patients in the past. It's not a terribly common condition, thank goodness, but more than you would think, considering the lack of research, the lack of information, and the really no good treatment plan.
Wow.
Yeah, it's as far as medicine has come, it's got a long way to go in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's right. And just
Also,
the
too, I'm sorry. Continue. I have to make a comment at some point here, though.
no, the not knowing is just the hardest part of the entire journey for me.
That's
Not
Yeah.
knowing.
Yeah. I just have to. I have to say this. You said something, and this is the kind of thing. I mean, it's in the news right now. It has been anyway. You said I didn't care if it was approved. The fact that you have to say that, right? Like that just breaks my heart, right? And that breaks a lot of people's hearts. And the fact that we live in a time where you're desperate, right? Like you desperate for him to be better and not be going through this. And you're like, let me see what's approved and what's not approved. And you're like, well, screw that. I'm just going to do whatever it takes. And that you have that ability to say, you know what, I don't care what's approved, right? Like that's wonderful that you were in a situation. Not everyone will, have that. And it upsets me that you had to think that at any point.
I think that's an important part of this. And the part of the reason I wanted to tell this story is I think about the knowledge I had, and I think about the financial situation I am in. And I am in meaningfully better position than
Hmm.
so much of the rest of the country in order to make healthcare decisions. And yet I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to navigate the system. And I was able to manage if we didn't have coverage. But the fact is, I didn't know.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think drawing light to that is an important thing that you're doing here.
Yeah, that's a big part of why I got on this podcast with Heather is, agreed to do the production here is because she said we were gonna, go down those roads and look at bring people the information they need to actually navigate these things. And the long-term care is kind of the first real road we're on
Hmm.
to, really educating people about a process that most of them are going to face at some point in one way or another, whether it
Mhm.
be an elderly parent or a spouse or a kid that's, suddenly very ill. That's what we're here trying to do. Yeah. So I'm really glad you're coming on telling this story. This is a step in the right direction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to share it because I know I'm not alone.
You definitely are not. Yeah. And so this is still ongoing. Like, where did things
Yeah,
go from there?
so over the course of time, medication helped the improvement. We actually got the pain management down. In fact, at one point, he went in to see Mike, as he calls him, and he said, Mike, I don't think I need to come back. And Mike said, I'm thrilled. He goes, I
Mm,
would love to never see you again. And in the healthcare space, you think of pain management as they just want the money, they want you to keep coming in. And instead, this is a provider who is genuinely thrilled that he did good work, that he doesn't have to see this patient, that things are well managed. And
yeah.
so my husband had been seeing his primary care doc, about every month, every 6 weeks, just checking in on medications. And he's at a point where his medications are stable, they're working effectively. He still has some pain, but it's not nearly like if it was a 10 before, it's a 1 now.
Mm,
Wow.
The medications are working. He does go, what he's found is about every 6 weeks or so, going in for his injections is helpful in making sure that the headaches don't take back off again. So he's back to life as normal. And I just thank God for that because this could have been such a different path.
hmm.
Yeah,
We're,
considering where it started and being told, you have something that may well not go away and will be the worst thing that can maybe happen to a person pain wise. And
yeah,
now,
yeah.
and he ends up fine. So I'm going to do the Heather thing here. So what was the timeline there from the
Yeah.
tooth extraction to him telling the doctor, I don't need to come back? How many months or weeks
So
was that?
that was probably a 6 month period. So if I think about it, it was 1 week of complete unknown misery. It was 2 weeks of medication making an improvement. It was probably 4 more weeks of medication and injections. And then we got to a point of stability. So about 5 months after that, then it was, okay, you know what? We're now past stable into progress.
Mhm.
And
And
so,
how long ago was all this? Was this recent?
uh, yeah, this happened. He had the tooth extracted on November 2nd of 23.
So,
So
Oh,
just over a
so this
year.
was like mostly happening last year. This is a year ago.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
he's doing what? He's still doing fine?
He's doing great. I
I love
cannot
a happy ending.
complain.
I was a
Yes.
little
Yes.
nervous I was making jokes during a story that was going to end badly. I'm glad that ended well.
and
Yeah.
so he's like maintenance mode. So you said he goes back every so often, like more like
About-
preventative. So
yeah, it's about every 6 to 8 weeks now he goes
for the
in
shots in like the
for
head
the
and the neck
shots in the face. Yep.
and the
Yep.
oh, that just
It
sounds
sounds
Oh, he
terrible,
terrible.
has to
right?
keep doing that? He has
Gosh.
to keep getting the shots in his face?
He Whether he has to forever, we don't know. I mean, because of the way his conditions have improved. So with trigeminal neuralgia, because it can be ongoing for the rest of your life, or it can be incidental. it appears that his may be incidental because the progress he made was much faster than folks who tend to have it over the course of their life. And the fact that he was able to step down his treatment. So he really, what happens now is the medication is keeping him pretty stable. But when he notices instead of his headaches happening, every 2 days, now they're happening every day or a couple of times a day, he's getting a flash of pain. Then in that case, then he'll make an appointment for the injections.
Wow.
And so the hope is that he can stop those and eventually can stop the medication, but we'll just
Not
have
right
to
now.
see.
Yeah.
Take it as it goes. I mean, just the fact that he actually recovered to the point that he can be a restaurant guy again, because I know how much work that is. That's amazing. I'm glad it came out that way.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
you and
I
me
mean,
both.
Uh,
but we were talking about the education side of this podcast. So what can you tell our listeners about this process that maybe, to give them maybe a little bit of a leg up over most of us who would literally have no idea what to do when faced with a situation like that? Like, where do you start? Who do you talk to? Like, what's the process we should, implement if we are faced with something like that?
Yeah, a couple of things that I would suggest. First of all, is really do get a relationship with your primary care doc before you need them. Going in
yeah.
and seeing them, it's super annoying. I'm aware to schedule it, but most insurance is covered at no cost. But having that made a big difference. Not being shy about bringing them a hot mess of things and believing that they will help you get the answer. So the primary care doc is so important in this. And that would be my first recommendation. My second recommendation is as a caregiver, bother everyone. Keep asking questions, keep searching things on the internet, keep making phone calls to whoever you can ask. And I know that after the seventh phone call where somebody's like, we can get you in, and I didn't even mention we tried to make an appointment with a neurologist because, okay, if it's a nerve issue, we should get into a neurologist. And they told us it would be 9 months.
Oh my
Ooh,
God.
jeez.
Okay,
We did
specialty care is like insane in terms of
crazy.
trying to get in to see people or
Yeah.
doctors.
So he
Yeah.
had his first appointment in August of this year, which thank goodness the primary care doc made progress. In fact, the neurologist said, oh, most primary care docs won't touch trigeminal neuralgia. And
You really
all I
lucked
could think
out.
was, had we given him 9 months, it was called suicide disease for a reason. And
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
wouldn't
and
have,
like if you let it go that long, then the treatments that worked might not work anymore.
Mm.
yeah, it would have been horrific. And so he had an appointment to go back in November. So he was at the neurologist in August. He had an appointment in November. They've canceled now twice, and they can get him in February.
Wait, they've canceled with you?
Yes.
So really not helpful,
No.
unfortunately. That
And this,
stinks.
yeah. And
Wow.
so, again, thank goodness we had our primary care doc who helped us through this process. But as a caregiver, I was at a point of starting to call neurologists. As he had started his medication, I was starting to call neurologist. Not, I live in Nebraska, in Omaha, so we have good healthcare here. I'm
Yeah,
not in the rural part
you're
of the
in like
state.
you're in a bigger city. Like,
Omaha's a real city,
I
yeah.
mean, think about like rural America and the lack of access to doctors, right? And or the need to have to travel. Like we run into that here a lot in Flagstaff, because we're
Mhm.
technically in rural part of Arizona and people travel down to Phoenix
Yeah.
regularly for medical care.
I,
Particularly the specialty stuff. We don't have
Yes.
specialists in
Yeah.
Flagstaff, really.
Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
ugh.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, if I think about specialty care, I really expected I could get something in Omaha, and we do. It's just a long wait. But I was really ready to, okay, can we get him on a plane and go to Chicago? Can we go to Minneapolis? What's it going to take?
Mhm.
But as if you are in a situation where you don't have a path forward, you are not bothering people. And if you're bothering them, who cares? You're
Yeah.
trying to take care of someone here who is not capable of advocating for themselves.
I was just gonna say, this is like either patient advocacy, self-advocacy, both. Yeah, you have to
You
use your words,
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah. And so as I think about others who are in a situation like we were in, phone calls, searches, asking questions, call your nurse friends. I mean, I know that feels invasive, but the fact is someone knows something that could help.
Hmm.
And it might be your doctor's friend from church. Don't care. If it makes an improvement, that's what matters. The other
Yeah.
thing I suggest, and it took me a while to do, is I had underestimated what a toll it took on me personally to be that scared. I was
Yeah.
worried about him and his health, but it wasn't until about 2 months later when I realized that all the fear I had been experiencing that whole time had built up. And I hadn't really been asking for help. I was busy asking for help. I was advocating for him. And it took me a while to ask for help for myself, to realize that I needed some support because that was a really scary experience. And so, as a caregiver, make sure you're doing that.
Yeah, the emotional stress is off the charts
Yeah.
for someone dealing with all that. Off the charts. Wonder if that's
Yeah.
maybe an episode later on. Find a therapist who helps people deal with the emotional and mental stress of such things.
There probably is.
There's got to be someone out there doing
Oh,
that. It'd be a huge field in psychiatry, I would think, because this is a very common issue, especially in America where we don't have proper health care, and a lot of people are just in the lurch when things happen.
I can name off several people literally right now whose names I will protect the innocent, but
Yeah.
who could probably, who are going through or have been going through maybe for, many, many, many years of dealing, parents with special needs, children, anyone who's caring for a spouse or a loved one, a mom, a dad, or whoever, who has a long-term medical condition and they're their number one. Like
yeah.
it's a lot.
It's
It's a lot.
And again, for years, I've talked about the benefits of EAPs, employee assistance programs,
Hmm.
healthcare on demand, making sure that you get the support that you need. And in that moment of fear, of urgency, of not knowing what was going to happen, I was the absolute last thing on my list. It was, who can I call? How do I help him? What needs to happen next? And that adds up. That's not sustainable.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell people all day long, make sure you take care of yourself. It's like a new mom with a baby. Sleep where the baby sleeps, and you're like, come on.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah, the baby sleeps for 10 minutes at a time. That doesn't really work.
yeah. And then there's reality, right? Like, well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna drop a company name here because she's actually a friend of mine from high school and she built an app. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Stacey, during our chat today was, is there anything that you wish existed that you could have had access to help you manage this better? And I think what my friend has created, it's called Ionicare. It's an app. It's called I Am Not Alone Care. It's an app for navigating situations like this where you get assigned a care, essentially a care navigator. And forgive me if I'm saying the wrong term, but it's for getting help from family, getting help from friends, and so that they can see within the app, you basically invite them and it's help with getting groceries, taking care, so you get a break, right? Like all of these things. I think it was primarily built for more like senior care support, but like
Mhm.
situations like this or long-term care for maybe a parent of a special needs child with autism or whatever it is. Anyway, and we're gonna do a show with Jess, I think, on Ionicare. I just got to get it scheduled, but like that's like the kind of solutions that we need. I think especially as full-time professionals too, who you're like trying to, without having to go out and like FMLA or something like that, right? Because there could be a billion different reasons that might happen. But is there, and sorry, I was like totally, dropping a company name there because she's a friend. I'm like really lucky. I know a lot of really great, brilliant people in this industry. So you being one of them.
That's what
And
20 plus years of service gets you.
yeah, yeah, I'm a healthcare industry veteran. You are
Same, same.
too. Yes, you are too. Yeah, you got a couple of the healthcare vets on this call. But what was like? Can you share if there was something amazing that you encountered that really was like a game changer for this experience outside of the actual doctors themselves, which obviously you've been um, kind of, gloating, we'll say gloating about because they're amazing,
Yes.
right? And that's important. Was there anything else that you encountered at any point, or
Um,
maybe something that you wish you had?
yeah. So I think that really it was those doctors that were the highlight of an otherwise really difficult time. Um, what I wish, if I look back, two things. One is like your friend's app, awesome. Had I thought to even ask for help, right? I was so busy in the navigating the medical space, which to your point, that's how our country works. There's just you are responsible for navigating your medical space. And that is intimidating and difficult. And as somebody who knows how this works, and I think a lot of organizations have tried to make progress doing that, right? If you think about the rise of healthcare navigation and patient advocacy, there's a lot of folks who are trying to do that. But I think today that works pretty well once you have a diagnosis. Once you know what the problem is, you can get second opinions. You can have people who turn you on to, well, this is the person who's best at blah, blah, blah. And here's how you rank your providers according to, they are, here's the five best doctors for trigeminal neuralgia. But what I really wish is that I had had more help in the unknown phase when we didn't know what was going on, what we didn't know what to do next. That was really the biggest gap and the thing that caused us the greatest concern.
So, like that kind of first week where you're just kind of sitting, you didn't know there was no diag. Okay.
Yep.
And yeah,
Oh, not knowing's the worst. Once you know what the problem is, at least you have a target. At least you have something you can shoot at. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
If
that's
you don't
right.
even know what the problem is, like, what do you even do? You literally have no
Well,
idea what to do.
that's right. And as I'm doing all of my research in that first week, I don't even know what to search besides massive headache, in which case stroke and aneurysm are the only things that come
mhm.
up.
Dr. Google
And
will send you down dark places
oh,
Oh
sometimes.
yeah,
it's
that
yeah,
WebMD wormhole is dangerous, man.
it is
Scary
it's
down
a
there.
it's a risky path. But that unknown phase. And look, for as frustrated as I was about my emergency room experience, they had patients in the hallway. I saw someone come in who was actively having a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
I can appreciate why we weren't their priority.
Hmm.
They were reasonably certain he wasn't going to die, so therefore it was no longer their primary responsibility. But as a healthcare system, that's incredibly fractured and doesn't actually help the patient. It's the way it works. That is their job. Their job is to make sure you're not an emergency any longer, and they checked that box. So I can't be mad that they did their job and they sent us home, but as an individual, I didn't know what to do. And
Yeah.
that's a place we could use some help.
Yeah. Well, and on top of it, like you certainly have people like, if you're talking about sitting in the ER seeing different, situations, right? Some
Mhm.
people don't use the ER properly, and so then they get overloaded, right? And so like kind of going back to the original part of the story, you're like, I know because I advise my employer clients on ER and, urgent care, proper usage. This is where a lot of our costs come from, right? Is because of overuse, misuse of ER and urgent care. What's the answer? You should have a relationship with your PCP. Find a doctor that you can trust, right? So that then you don't have to wait for 4 months to get in to see them. Instead, maybe it's only 2 days, right?
Yes, yes. And that's right. And I think that's if there's one takeaway your listeners have, it's to get a relationship with your PCP, to really at least, even if it's only once a year, even if it's a check the box, here's my blood draw, weigh me, ask me if I feel fine, and I'll tell you yes. But once you're in their roster, once you're on the list, once they've seen you once, the system gets easier to navigate, and your ability to get help when that scary thing pops up is much shorter of a time you have to wait.
Yeah. And one of the things too, and we're actually hoping to cover this in another episode, is actually the need for PCPs.
Mm,
NAU here in Flagstaff, Northern Arizona University, announced this program last year to create through their medical programs to essentially put more primary care doctors out into the universe in Arizona because we have such a big PCP shortage. And I'm sure that's not
mm,
an Arizona problem. That's an everywhere problem. Because I think what happened was, 20 years ago, a lot of these medical universities were, I don't know if incentivizing is the right word. And I've heard this directly from chief medical officers that I've worked with in the past, that
mhm.
they drove a lot of these folks who were going, wanted to become a physician down into the specialty path. So then all of a sudden it took away from the PCP area, right? So you've got all these specialists, tons of doctors in that area. You have way less PCP. So how can you do preventive care or value-based care now that, came on into
Yes.
the universe, which I worked in the value-based care space at Aetna when it was kind of a novel idea. Now it's kind of part of our repertoire, right? But you have
Mm,
to build those PCP networks back up. And so, NAU, for example, like I was saying, that's a big goal for them,
yeah.
is to bring more PCPs back in because if we're going to be able to support
Mm,
the populations with more preventative care, value-based care approaches, and all that kind of stuff, well, then we need more PCPs, and we don't have them.
yeah.
So,
I we did spend a good bit of time with his PCP, and as the industry I was in, we got to have some really interesting conversations about what it's like to be a PCP.
mhm,
And he's employed by a hospital system, a healthcare system in this area. And he did say he likes that better because he doesn't have to deal as much with the business side as he
mhm,
did when he had his own practice. He's been around for a while. But he said that the administrative difficulties are
mhm.
just they're there. And I had
They're
told
too
him
much for
they're
a private provider practice. Is the administrative burden is like off the charts. It's such a huge trend with these guys and women shutting these private practices down or just merging into the larger health systems. That's
yeah.
that's a big change that we've been seeing the last few years.
It's big. And he said, look, I like to see my patients. I like to get to know people and figure out how do I make their health just a little bit better to make their lives better. I
Mhm.
like to do those things. And he said, that's why I got into this. He said, and I think there's a lot of people out there who want to be in medicine for those reasons. But right now, the hill is too hard to climb. So
Let
they either,
doctors doctor. That's what I always like to
yeah,
say. Doctors want a
that's
doctor.
That's exactly what he said. He's like, I love this. And, needless to
Mhm,
say, we have been more than complimentary of his services over this last year. But he's like, this is what I got in this for. I didn't
mhm.
get in this to fill out paperwork and to submit prior authorizations and to, check to see if this medicine was covered. And I get that's how our healthcare system works today. But the fact is, you're not going to get good doctors if that's where they have to spend most of their time.
With all the tech in the world these days, how do they not have some kind of just record it while you talk to the patient kind of
Actually,
technology? Like it drives me nuts that they have to spend half their time filling out a chart with a pen
it's
with the
funny
technology that we have.
say that. The last time we were in there, he asked us if it was okay if he had Google record our conversation.
Mhm.
There you go.
Um,
That's where it has to go. Like
Yeah.
that has to happen if healthcare is going to be an effective thing at all in the future. There needs to be a doctor-patient relationship that isn't based on paperwork.
yeah.
You know,
And
like the paperwork needs to. There's got to be a way for AI to handle the paperwork at this point. I
yeah,
don't know that
there's
much about technology, but it's got to be there. I see what it does. Like ChatGPT is a thing, it's a
It's coming.
ChatGPT application, just a little more specialized.
Yeah, I'm not going to claim to be a technology expert, but I think, the challenge is rightfully we protect healthcare information through HIPAA and lots of other things, but that makes everybody so gun shy to actually use technology in a way that is effective. And
Yeah.
there has to be a way to balance these two. And we
Yeah.
haven't found it, or at the very least, we haven't found the right motivation to find
Mhm.
it.
Well, hopefully, because this podcast is about discovering the future of healthcare.
We talked to somebody about
we're gonna find somebody, and I'm sure
Well, we
we'll
talked to
probably.
somebody about they had an app that kind of put all your info in one place. I can't even remember who.
That would be Guava.
That's Guava. That's an
Oh,
Yeah.
upcoming thing,
cool.
I think.
Guava Health, they're another one. We just did an interview. We're going to be meeting with their chief medical officer as well, who comes from, she's a hospitalist, but is joining this tech startup. And it's all about like managing your care and having all of your medical records pulled into this one app. I know, right? Like kind of
Love it.
crazy. Oh, you're gonna have to listen to this one. It was fast. It's amazing what they're doing. They're solving such a huge problem.
It's a step toward what we're talking about. It's not quite like charting through
Yeah.
AI, but it's gathering the information, putting it all in one place, and
Yeah.
it's the kind of thing that needs to happen, I
Yeah.
think.
Which, I was going to ask you, Stacey, as my final question today was where do you feel the healthcare industry has the most opportunities to grow and change? And I think we just talked about one of them, Guava Health is maybe part of that solution, charting on AI. Is there anything else you'd add to that we haven't already
Yeah, I
covered?
think if I had to say one thing that would make the healthcare industry better, it's to find, I say efficiencies, and my insurance industry days would tell you efficiencies mean cost savings. But what I actually mean is ways to let doctors be doctors, let the money flow where the money needs to flow, let people do what it is they got in the business to do. And so, whatever that efficiency looks like, and whether that's technology, whether that's time, whether that's the way in which we let practitioners proceed, we've got to find those efficiencies and we have to make it financially viable, or we have to fund it in some way that makes sense for us.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of people doing some amazing work out there, and we're bringing them on the show and then having, conversations like this, right? This is the whole point of having these human stories is that we can present these, different scenarios, like real life occurrences. Like this is happening, and it could happen to you. And so, you sharing your story with us, Stacey, with your husband, and I'm so glad that he is doing well. And I do hope that he continues down that path and you continue to get the care that you all need up there in Omaha. But this is why we're doing this is so that we can share this information, provide education, give people a place to start. In some cases that might just be what it is, right? Someone might be listening to this episode and now they'll know something that they didn't know
Yeah.
before before they listened, and they'll be prepared if they run into a scenario like this. And I hope that you never do, but I mean, we're all living much longer lives. There's different, I don't know, I feel like there's like I mean, heck, we had COVID. Look, how do you even deal with that? You never
I've
know what's
had it
going to
like
happen.
3 times.
Yeah. Now we got the bird flu. I mean, you
Yeah,
just don't know what's going to happen. it's
that's
it's a
right.
crazy world.
Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate what you're bringing to the light that you're bringing to innovations, because the fact is there's a lot of people trying to do the right thing that want to make healthcare good, affordable, and appropriate for everybody. And so just shining the light on those that are trying something different and then helping people understand how it works, I'm thrilled to be
Yeah.
part of it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Stacey, thank you. Really appreciate you meeting with us today. This has been a great conversation, enlightening in some of the best and worst ways. But
Yes.
I'm glad the story ended with a happy ending.
me
That
too.
that was the important part, honestly, for me.
Yeah.
And if you're in a position, go see your doctor.
Yes.
Just say hi once in a while. Make sure
That's
you're on
right.
the list. That's the
Just
biggest thing I'm taking from this.
That's
that
right.
is exactly it. Make sure you
So,
stay on their list. Check in with
right.
them.
Make sure you're on the list. That's the key. Okay.
Yep. And there you have it. That's it for today. That's
All right.
all
Thanks,
right.
Stacey. And there you go. Our interview with Stacey Meade. It's breaking a little new ground on the uprising. Someone who's in the industry but came to us with a personal, as you would call it, human story. From the more patient experiencer side,
Hmm.
but with the knowledge of being in the industry for so long. That was an interesting conversation. And I'm very glad her husband's okay.
Me too. Yeah.
But so what are our main takeaways from that in the
Well,
overall?
I think the most important thing, and you kind of just touched on this too, is that even the most educated, connected, and experienced, like in the healthcare industry, which I consider myself as well, Stacey and I shared that. We're vets, right? But even she didn't know what to do when this very significant, huge, critical issue, struck. Like, what does that say about our American health
Yeah,
system?
that's very telling about how things work here. It
Yeah.
really is.
I mean, when you don't know where to go, and I say this to people a lot too, and I'm like, for as long as I have worked in the healthcare industry, and I know a lot, and I've been a lot of different parts of the industry too, so like not just like one like niche area. Um, I still can't answer people's questions. Sometimes I literally do not know where to go. So hearing Stacey's story today, I probably would be just as lost if something big like that happened to my family. So,
Yeah.
you know.
And we were talking about the potential of, making this easier, like creating databases for people to know where to go, things like that. We've kind of touched on that in a few of the interviews we've done.
Hmm.
But we
Yeah.
should put out some feelers, see if we can find someone to come on who's maybe actually already in, directly working on that kind of problem.
Yeah. I think we mentioned Guava, who we do an interview with. They have the app for managing chronic care. I mentioned Ionic Care too. That's another one for
Oh, that's right. We got
caretakers.
the Ionic Care coming up.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of the cool thing about what we're starting to see with this podcast. It's kind of like we're creating our own little healthcare constellation that like all these different episodes, meeting with different people, whether it be the human stories or the business side, they all start interconnecting together. Not all of them, but a lot of them, right? And I think that's so cool. That might be
That's
my
gonna
favorite
be
thing.
it's gonna be a big Venn diagram kind of thing in the end. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like a lot of these things are gonna overlap in ways we don't even realize until it happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Like that's my experience in life in general, is that's how things go. So
Yeah. I mean, and so far, right? Like the way the literally the reason that this podcast even exists, and it is through the interviews and the conversations that we've been having, there's one thing that gets revealed over and over again. So this isn't like a huge aha moment, but the healthcare system doesn't work for most of us, not even for the providers. We hear this all the time. When doctors get to actually doctor, that's where the magic happens. But when they are pulled in, billing different places, like they can't do their thing. And then for like the patient side, it just to navigate the system, to know where to go, to know where to get care, to know what you need. It is an uphill battle. And but with innovation, and these people like Guava, the companies like Ionic Care and ketamine therapy, like all these people and all these things that we're learning about, these are opening doorways, right, for us, as humans, as consumers of the healthcare industry and all the products and things. So anyway, big changes, and we're talking about them here. So
yeah, I hope we can actually help. I really hope we can help
yeah,
with what we're doing here.
yeah, and use your voice. I mean, gosh, we're a podcast, right? We literally talk. Be an advocate, for yourself, for your loved ones that you're taking care of, like Stacy. And just don't stop until you find someone who will help or can help, because they're out there. So don't, when something big like that's happening, don't wait for the answers to come to you.
Yeah.
Just
And remember, you're not alone too. Like there's a lot of people going through that stuff every day. And there are communities out there online, and there's communities maybe in your neighborhood, IRL kind of stuff. But, just fight the good fight, man. Don't, and the big thing to me is don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be
Mhm.
afraid to use those resources that are out there. So many people get left on an island when they get into these situations. They feel so alone, and but they at the same time they don't want to ask for help. You got to, you know, let go of the ego, man. We
Mhm.
all need help sometimes.
Yeah,
Everybody needs help sometimes. Don't be afraid to ask.
exactly.
But I got to say, I like this podcast more with every episode.
Me
I
too.
really do. If you guys out there listening or watching feel the same, please hit all those happy little fun buttons, whatever platform you're on, the likes and subscribes and shares, and, maybe do some joining, some bell ringing. We're on YouTube. We're on Patreon. If you really want to join the uprising, Patreon's the place to do it for as little as $1 a month, and our tiers go up from there. But you get early access to all the interviews upcoming. We're usually, a couple of months or so ahead on our recording schedule. So you get a pretty good head start on the public releases, and you get to help fund what we're doing here. It's not the easiest thing to run a podcast. So we do appreciate any support anyone can give us. If you don't want to do the money side, but if you, take a minute, leave us a rating and review, things like that. Like, subscribe, share, follow. You know how it works. But what else do we got to say here, Heather?
You can find us online at healthcareuprising.com, as well as on all the social media platforms, including LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky. Just search Healthcare Uprising Podcasts and you'll find us pretty easily, along with our super cool logo. If you do have a story to tell, if you are a CEO, founder of a healthcare startup, or a not so healthcare startup, but are just doing something cool and innovative, or human, and you have a great story to tell, because who doesn't have a healthcare experience that they can share, give us a shout on our email at healthcareuprising@gmail.com. Or if you have any questions for us, or maybe even one of our interviewees, you can message us there. But that's about it. So that's it for this dose of Healthcare Uprising. Until next time, keep looking for the good in the world. Sometimes it's where you least expect it.
This has been a Shut Up production.